There are moments inside the British monarchy when something quietly shifts. Not dramatically, not with an announcement or a press conference, just a slow, deliberate change in the architecture of power that most people do not notice until it has already become permanent. This is one of those moments, and it begins, as so many of the most significant royal stories do, with a name that still carries more emotional weight than almost any other in modern British history: Diana. Nearly 3 decades after her death in that Paris tunnel in the early hours of August 31st, 1997, Princess Diana's memory has not faded. It has not been filed away into comfortable historical distance. It still moves people to tears in countries she never visited. Her photograph still sells, her story still divides rooms, and inside the palace walls, where decisions are made quietly and power shifts without press releases, her legacy has become something far more than a memory. It has become a battleground. For years, multiple parties have found ways to invoke Diana's name and story for their own purposes. Her image, her humanitarian work, her complicated relationship with the monarchy, all of it has been referenced, positioned, and, in the assessment of people close to Prince William, used. Used in ways that serve commercial interests, personal narratives, and public image strategies that have very little to do with genuinely honoring who she was. William has watched all of it. Every documentary pitch, every commercial project linked to her name, every carefully timed mention of Diana dropped into a press interview or a streaming series by parties who understand precisely what her name does to public sentiment. He has watched, and he has said very little publicly. No statements, no interviews, no visible reaction. That silence has never been passivity. It has been patience. Because what is now unfolding around Diana's legacy is not a reaction. It is not an emotional response to something that finally pushed William too far. It is the activation of something that has been building for a long time, a clear, determined effort by the Prince of Wales to establish that his mother's story belongs to the people who actually loved her, and to the British public that still grieves her, and not to anyone who sees her memory as raw material for a commercial enterprise. The stakes could not be higher. Next year, the summer of 2027, will mark 30 years since Diana died. 30 years. That anniversary was once imagined as a moment when her two sons might stand together in the Sunken Garden at Kensington Palace, beneath the bronze statue they commissioned in her honor, and present a united front to the world. A moment of shared grief, a moment of reconciliation. That vision is not what is materializing. Hi viewers, do you think Prince William is right to take personal control of how his mother's legacy is used, or should Harry have an equal say in Diana's story? Leave your answer in the comments. This one matters. What is materializing instead is something royal watchers describe as the most significant internal struggle over Diana's memory since the years immediately after her death. And at the center of it is a reported plan, confirmed by multiple sources in recent months, that put William and Harry on opposing sides of a line neither of them can easily walk back from. According to reports first published in early 2026 and since corroborated by palace insiders speaking to major outlets, Prince Harry has been developing a documentary project about Princess Diana through his Netflix deal. The project, understood to be timed for the 30th anniversary of her death in August 2027, would examine Diana's life, her treatment by the media and the monarchy, and the lasting impact of her death on both of her sons. Harry's position, according to those close to him, is straightforward. Diana was his mother. He has an inherent right, as her son, as the person who walked behind her coffin at 12 years old, to tell her story. He does not believe that right requires his brother's permission. William's position, according to sources, is equally clear, and it is the opposite. A palace aide speaking to a major outlet earlier this year put it plainly. William, they said, is prepared to take this as far as necessary. He is actively exploring every available obstacle that could be placed in the project's path. legal avenues, institutional influence, whatever leverage exists. He is, in the words of those closest to him, willing to use all of it. The word reportedly used to describe William's reaction to the plans, sickened. Not frustrated, not concerned, sickened. That is the emotional temperature inside Kensington Palace right now when Diana's name comes up in the context of Harry and Meghan's commercial work. And the situation is about to get considerably more complicated. To understand why William is drawing this line so sharply, and why the timing matters so much, it is necessary to understand what the Sussex commercial operation in California actually looks like in the context of Diana's legacy. Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties in January 2020. They relocated first to Canada, then to California. They built a commercial portfolio, a Netflix deal, a Spotify deal that later ended, a memoir, documentary work, public engagements that was funded, at least in part, by the inheritance Harry received from Diana. He has spoken about it openly. He has said that the money Diana left him was the safety net that made it possible for them to leave. That context matters, because it means that Diana's legacy has not just been invoked narratively in the Sussex public story, it has been foundational to their financial independence. Reports published in May 2026 suggested that the Sussex household had been forced to significantly scale back their operations in California, reducing full-time staff from 16 employees to 5, according to former People magazine editor Dan Wakeford, who reported the claims in his Celebrity Intelligence newsletter. The Sussex office pushed back firmly, labeling the claims speculative and lacking on-the-record evidence. But the reports added a new layer of scrutiny to the question of what direction Harry and Meghan's commercial work takes next. The Diana documentary, in that context, is not just a creative project. It is a financial one. And that is precisely the dimension that is reported to be driving William's response. The concern inside William's circle, expressed by multiple sources to multiple outlets over the past few months, is not simply that Harry wants to make a film about their mother. It is that Meghan is expected to have significant creative involvement in that project. It is that the project is being developed through a commercial streaming platform. It is that it will generate money, substantial money, from an anniversary of their mother's death. And it is that William was not consulted, has not given any approval, and believes the project crosses a line he has been drawing for years. One source put it starkly. Harry is utterly convinced that commemorating his mother is something he has an inherent right to do as her son. In his mind, Diana's memory is not the property of the institution. But William's view is different. He believes that using Diana's story for commercial gain, particularly in a format where Meghan has significant creative input, is a use of his mother's memory that he cannot accept. These are not abstract disagreements. They are two brothers, both of whom carry the lifelong wound of losing their mother at devastating ages, reaching fundamentally opposite conclusions about what that loss means and what it permits. The timing of this confrontation over Diana's legacy overlaps directly with a separate, very recent development that has put William in a more assertive position than he has occupied in years. On June 6, 2026, just 2 days before the writing of this script, Peter Phillips, Princess Anne's son and King Charles's nephew, married NHS nurse Harriet Spurling in a private ceremony at All Saints' Church in the village of Kemble, Gloucestershire. The wedding was attended by senior members of the royal family, including King Charles, Queen Camilla, and William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. It was, by all outward appearances, a quiet family occasion. Behind the scenes, it was anything but. In the days leading up to the wedding, a dispute emerged that went entirely unreported in official palace communications, but which was widely covered by royal correspondence, citing palace sources. The disagreement centered on something that might initially appear minor, a tiara. The tradition for women marrying into the royal family is that they may borrow a piece from the royal collection for their wedding day. Peter Phillips's first wife, Autumn Kelly, wore Princess Anne's festoon tiara for their 2008 wedding. Zara Phillips wore the meander tiara for her 2011 wedding to Mike Tyndall. The precedent was clear. The tradition was established. But Harriet Spurling is not from an aristocratic background. Peter Phillips holds no royal title. Princess Anne declined titles for her children at birth to give them a chance at a relatively normal life. And according to a palace source cited by the Daily Express and reported by multiple outlets, Queen Camilla's office raised objections to Harriet accessing jewels from the royal vault on these grounds. Princess Anne, by all accounts, was frustrated, and Prince William intervened. According to the same sources, William authorized what was described as a total administrative lockdown of the royal vaults, ensuring that Peter's bride would be able to wear a tiara should Anne choose to lend her one, regardless of Camilla's office's objections. Buckingham Palace has not officially confirmed or denied the account, but the reported intervention attracted significant attention precisely because of what it suggests about where the lines of authority currently run inside the palace. William did not issue a public statement. He did not give an interview. He simply changed the terms of access to the vault. Royal observers noted the irony immediately. Diana's sapphire engagement ring, now worn by Catherine, Princess of Wales, is one of the most iconic pieces in the entire royal collection. Camilla, over the years, has worn pieces that once belonged to Diana, including an emerald pendant given to Diana by the Queen Mother on her 1981 wedding day, that was subsequently refashioned into a brooch. These choices have never been uncontroversial. The question of who has access to what within the royal collection and on whose authority has always been more politically charged than it appears from the outside. The reported clash over Harriet Spurling's tiara was not really about a tiara. It was about who gets to decide. And if the sources are accurate, William decided, quickly, quietly, and without asking for agreement. Camilla's reported frustration at the tiara episode sits within a much larger picture of shifting dynamics inside the palace, one that analysts and royal experts had been tracking with increasing interest throughout 2025 and into 2026. The central question, discussed openly by royal commentators for at least the past year, is this: what happens to Camilla when William becomes king? Royal expert Christopher Anderson, quoted by Cosmopolitan in April 2025, offered one of the most direct assessments. William, Anderson said, merely tolerates his submother. She has always been, in the expert's words, a little afraid of him. When the time comes, Camilla's role in the monarchy may be re-evaluated. She will still likely take part in some royal engagements, but the parameters of her position, and particularly her influence, are expected to change. That assessment is not controversial among those who follow the royal family closely. What is more nuanced is the question of when that shift begins, whether it happens gradually in the background while Charles is still king, or whether it waits for the formal moment of succession. The evidence of 2025 and 2026 suggests the former. Reports from OK magazine, published in January 2026, citing palace insiders, described the state of the relationship between Camilla and Catherine, Princess of Wales, as open warfare, a phrase that, accounting for tabloid hyperbole, signals something considerably more tense than polite institutional distance. The reported flashpoint was a moment during the state visit of Donald Trump, in which Camilla appeared to ask Kate to step aside during a conversation with Melania Trump. Palace aides were quoted describing the fallout as almost impossible to contain. Catherine, according to the same sources, has stood firmly alongside William throughout. That alignment, William and Catherine operating as a unit with a clear sense of where the monarchy is headed and what it should look like, is increasingly visible in the public record. At the 2026 Commonwealth Day service at Westminster Abbey on March 9th, the two couples, Charles and Camilla, William and Catherine, presented a united front for the cameras. But the symbolic choices were telling. Catherine wore pieces connected to Queen Elizabeth II's collection, drawing on the late Queen's direct legacy. The messaging, intentional or otherwise, was clear. The future is already being shaped. And Diana's legacy is central to that shaping. William's Homewards project, the most ambitious philanthropic initiative of his public life, is explicitly framed as a continuation of his mother's work. Diana took Prince William to homeless shelters as a child. She visited Centrepoint, the youth homelessness charity, as its patron from 1992. William became Centrepoint's patron in 2005, taking over directly from his mother, and this year marks 20 years of that connection. He launched Homewards in 2023 through the Royal Foundation with the stated aim of making homelessness rare, brief and unrepeated across 6 UK locations. He is using land from the Duchy of Cornwall, the historic estate under his direct control, to build homes for people experiencing homelessness, beginning with 24 low-carbon homes at Nansleydon in Cornwall in partnership with St Petrock's, a Cornish homelessness charity. A second project in Lambeth, South London, will convert a duchy property into 16 affordable homes for young people aged 18 to 25, expected to be ready by the end of 2026. This is not accidental. Royal sources have been explicit about it. This is not just William's legacy, one insider told Hello magazine, it is his mother's legacy. He is committed to this. Committed to transforming the way this nation thinks about homelessness. He is building Diana's legacy into the physical fabric of the country, brick by brick, home by home, year by year. Not through documentaries, not through commercial partnerships, through the land he controls, the institutions he leads, and the charitable work he intends to continue for the rest of his life. That is the context in which the Diana documentary dispute lands. It is not a simple sibling disagreement about a film. It is a fundamental clash about what Diana's memory means, who it belongs to, and what it should be used for. And against the backdrop of William's own long-term, publicly documented efforts to embed Diana's values into serious humanitarian work, the prospect of a commercially produced anniversary documentary developed through a streaming deal with significant financial stakes looks, from William's perspective, like exactly the kind of use of his mother's memory that everything he has built is designed to stand against. There is a human dimension to all of this that the institutional language of royal politics can sometimes obscure. These are 2 brothers. Both of them lost their mother when they were children. William was 15, Harry was 12. They walked behind her coffin through the streets of London, while hundreds of thousands of people lined the route and the world watched on television. Both of them have carried that loss for their entire adult lives. Harry has spoken about it more publicly and more rawly. He has described the trauma of losing Diana at 12. He has talked about the years he spent not processing his grief, throwing himself into work, trying not to think about it. He has been honest, in a way that is unusual for a member of the royal family, about the lasting psychological impact of that loss. William has spoken about it less, but the record of his actions tells its own story. The statue in the Sunken Garden, commissioned by both brothers jointly in 2017 and unveiled on what would have been Diana's 60th birthday in July 2021. The Centrepoint patronage, maintained for 20 years, following directly in her footsteps. The Homewards project, built in her spirit. The Diana Award, at whose legacy ceremonies he has personally presented awards to young changemakers from across the world, Australia, Bangladesh, Nigeria, the United Kingdom, the United States, young people carrying forward the values Diana championed. He does not talk about his grief very often, but he acts on it constantly. When royal expert Anderson says that Diana's memory is the line William will not let anyone cross, the evidence supports that assessment. What is changing now is that William appears to be moving from a defensive position, watching and waiting, into something more active. The reported legal consultations over the documentary project, the reported vault intervention at the Peter Phillips wedding, the documented pattern of William asserting Kensington Palace's authority in ways that constrain the sphere of influence of those around him, including Camilla's office and the Sussex operation in California. None of this happens in isolation. None of it is accidental. A palace aide speaking to a major outlet earlier this year put the underlying dynamic in terms that have not been widely challenged by those familiar with the palace's internal workings. William, they said, is trying to take over the monarchy. Whether that framing is entirely fair, whether it accounts for the complexity of a man who is simply preparing to lead an institution he will one day be responsible for, is a question worth sitting with. Former royal photographer Ian Pelham Turner observed that Charles is not passive in this dynamic. He is still the king, and he is not simply handing over the keys. But the direction of travel is clear, and Charles, for all the complexity of his position as both father and sovereign, appears, based on every available piece of evidence, to be choosing stability and succession over protecting any individual's position within the institution, even his wife's. That is not a small thing. That is a king making a calculation that the long-term health of the monarchy requires his heir's authority to be clear, and making that calculation with full knowledge of what it costs personally. The story of Diana's legacy in the summer of 2026 does not have a neat resolution. It does not end with a signed document or a final ruling or a conversation that closes the wound. It ends, as this chapter of it ends, with a question that nobody inside the palace has fully answered yet, and that question is this. In the summer of 2027, when the 30th anniversary of Diana's death arrives, what will the British public see? Will they see the two brothers who once stood together in the Sunken Garden beneath that bronze statue on their mother's birthday, managing somehow to be in the same place at the same time for the woman who raised them both? Or will they see what some who know them closely now fear, a divided family, a contested legacy, two men who love the same woman and cannot agree what loving her means? The Sunken Garden at Kensington Palace is one of the most quietly powerful places in Britain. Diana loved it. She spent time there when she lived at the palace. The gardeners planted it in white flowers in 2017, on the 20th anniversary of her death. White forget-me-nots, white tulips, white roses, inspired by her wardrobe and the famous Mario Testino photographs. It took 1,000 hours of planting, more than 4,000 of her favourite flowers. The gardeners simply changed what grew there. No press release, no official ceremony. They just made it beautiful for her. The bronze statue stands at the centre of it now, her name engraved on the plinth, a poem set into the paving, 3 children reaching toward her. The public views it from the cradle walk that surrounds the garden, because they cannot enter, because it is still, in a very real sense, her private space. Prince William walks past it when he goes to work, every day. Whatever decisions he makes about his mother's legacy, the legal consultations, the vault lockdowns, the institutional positioning, the 30-year anniversary that is now barely 14 months away, he makes them as the man who commissioned that statue with his brother and stood in that garden in July 2021 and said goodbye to his mother again, publicly, for the last time they managed to do it together. That is who is drawing this line. Not an institution, not a legal team, not a palace communications strategy, a son. And the story of what happens next, what William actually does with the legal options reportedly on his desk, what Harry decides to do with the Netflix project, and whether the two brothers find any version of a shared path before August 2027 arrives, is a story that is still being written inside those palace walls right now. One development in particular, involving a private communication between senior members of the royal family about the anniversary plans, has begun to attract serious attention among those who track the institution most closely. The details of that exchange and what they reveal about where William's red lines actually sit are beginning to come into focus. That story is coming next on Britain Royals. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bells so you'll be the first to know when it drops.